Okay, Joe, I guess you can get started.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Tonight's going to be a busy one. We've got a guest at 8 o'clock, Hank Erdmann. I think I saw his picture there. We'll bring you on right at 8 o'clock. But tonight, I'd like to say welcome. And do we have any guests this evening that they can introduce themselves? I think I recognize most everyone. Is there anyone there? Well, let's move on. As usual, I'm going to say it again. Anything we missed tonight, look for it in the newsletter. It's all there. Ellen does such a super job with that. We have a few reminders. The first being we have our June show. It's called the Community Spotlight. We need to get Jane pictures as quick as possible, so she's not inundated all at once. Does anyone need any clarity on what the Community Spotlight means? If you do, let's raise those questions now for a few minutes. Anyone? Well, we have great expectations. I think she's got a couple of them.
I'm relatively new, so I don't know anything about it.
Sorry, couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry. I'm relatively new, so I don't know anything about.
Okay. Well, the Community Spotlight is our annual show this year. It's going to be in June. And what we're trying to do is to have each one of us bring as many as 8 pictures to Jane Hurst, the lady that puts together our show in June. But the Community Spotlight is where we can bring maybe 8 pictures that represent a community in the Milwaukee area or places you have visited, that kind of in 8 pictures be able to tell us a little bit about that particular place. It should be rather interesting. Most of us do a little bit of traveling around that about. So that would be, that's our goal, is to have that put together for the June show. I think Jane would probably like to have those probably by the middle of May or sometime in that area, so she can get her slideshow put together.
Yep.
Am I right, Jane?
Yep, middle May, 2100 by 2100 and sent via email. None of these fancy drop boxes or websites or anything, just send them email. You can certainly probably do 4 at a time, 5 at a time. So it might take a couple emails, but I prefer to get emails.
Okay.
My email address is in the newsletter.
Yeah, there's more information in the newsletter about it. So we'll go from there. Any more questions on that topic? We'd like to have as much as participation as possible. We've had good shows in the past. I hope we have a really good one this year as well. As I mentioned, Hank Erdmann is our guest tonight. We'll be seeing him about 8 o'clock. But next month, we also have another program. That one is by Hazel Meredith, and that's called Working with Textures and Overlays. I think we've got a couple of experts in that category, so I think she's given us some motivation to look at what that is all about. That should really be a good one, I think. In July, well, we've already covered Jane in June, but in July, we're going to have a real world meeting on July the 12th. That's 1 week later than normal. There's information in the newsletter about that, but that's hopefully where we can finally get to see a lot of each other face to face. The group that's working on that will be meeting in the next 30 to 45 days and finalize the details about that. There's some information there now in the newsletter on page 2. But we're optimistic that we'll have some good weather. People will be back from the July 4th vacation or whatever. And that July the 12th at a local park over in the falls, we'll be able to together and We don't know if we'll be playing games or whatever, but it should be a good time. Let's hope so anyway. There's been a couple of questions lately about field trips to Shady Lane or the zoo for April and May. Those that have raised that question, why don't you jump in and tell us what you'd like to see happen here in the month of April? Brian? Is he here tonight?
Yeah, Brian's here.
I'm unmuted now. I'm sorry. Yeah, Shady Lane, I've kind of led that in past years. Stopped over last week, took a look at things, and there's a few things blooming, but they got a long way to go. My recommendation is that we would do that on Saturday, April 30th, which is the same day as the Model Railroad Jubilee. So usually they've got people out selling some snacks, maybe something to eat, actually burgers or something. I don't remember what they've had in past years, but it's a fun day. That gets us in, I think, the week before Mother's Day. So if you wait a week later, which I think we've done sometimes, then a lot of the better flowers are gone. So I think the sooner we get there, the better. So I don't know, I'd recommend Saturday, April 30th for Shady Lane.
What time would be a good time for gathering?
Well, they on their website they say they start at 10 a.m., but I called in the other morning and they were opening at 9. So I think we could safely say 9. They may even choose 8. If so, we can alert people via email a week or so before. But I guess why don't we go with 9 a.m.
All right. Anybody have any objections to that date and time? Well, I guess it's set. The Shady Lane Adventure this year will be April 30th, a Saturday, around 9 o'clock. Is there a favorite place over there to park if we're going to try to meet?
In past years, they've asked us to park around back and come in the back entrance, just to save the main parking lot, for the paying customers. So the folks there would really appreciate that, Carl and Heidi.
Would I be right that they don't want tripods or not?
No, the tripods are fine. We've done that in the
Okay.
past.
All right.
The orchid show's a problem, but
Okay. I've never done that particular adventure, so I might get over there this year. Okay. Now, I understand we also have a potential field trip to Chicago in June. Ian, is that correct?
Yep. I believe it was June 18th that we were targeting. I don't have really too many details on it yet. I haven't been
Okay.
down to Chicago myself in probably a year.
Is it tentatively June 18th?
Yeah, that's a weekend that will. Let me just double check. I'm almost positive
Okay.
that's what I read. But
that's what you said in the email. Yeah.
that's what I thought. That's what I've got on my calendar. So that's what I'm planning for. It'll probably end up being a combined club trip because I'm also in the urban ecology club. So instead of doing 2 trips and walk around twice, just whoever wants to
Okay.
come comes. We take the Amtrak, which I believe is now back up to their full schedule. Again, I haven't dug too much into details yet, but we usually take the Amtrak down there early in the morning, usually one of the earliest, if not the earliest train. And then sometimes people split off and come back a little after lunchtime. Some people stay till like the 5 o'clock train and we come back. We usually get back here around, I think, like 7-ish, 7:30.
Okay.
I have some ideas as far as a route. My plan is when it finally warms up, gets nicer out, I'm going to do a solo trip because it's obviously easier for me to run around just by myself and kind of figure out an idea. I'm thinking possibly leveraging the bus system to take us out to the museums because the Museum of Science and Industry is a really cool building that's been around since the Chicago Exposition. And not only is the building itself beautiful, but there's also a park behind it with the Japanese garden. So we could go back there. Then we could hop back on the bus and we go up to the other museum campus, which is the Field Museum, the planetarium, shed. And that's where you get the Chicago skyline shot and that type of stuff. So like I said, when we get a little closer, I'll do a trial run on my own to kind of make sure the walking's okay and the transportation works, all that
Right.
stuff.
Thank you very much.
Is that city buses then? Is that Chicago
City buses, yeah. Usually you can, so they have CTA pass you can buy when you get down there, and it basically gets you like an all-day pass. So if we want to take the bus there's a bus right at the train station, there's a route, I'm pretty sure it takes you all the way out to the museum, and then we can take a bus from the museum to the other museums. And if we want to take a bus from the museums back into the city to do more city, Riverwalk stuff, we could do that. So it's just been a while since I've done any of this because of COVID. Like I said, I went once last summer. So I need to check prices, check availability, all that fun stuff.
Okay.
And we need COVID numbers to stay down. So that too.
Well, speaking of Chicago, I think we had several members that went to the flower show at the Botanical Garden. Some of those pictures are posted on our Facebook site. Some really, really beautiful pictures that came out of that. So if you haven't seen some of them, venture over to the Facebook site and take a look. Some of those pictures, I think, are also in the newsletter, just a couple of them.
Yep.
All right. Before we do the President's Challenge and show and tell, because we have the Wacko Spring Competition coming up here pretty soon for the deadline.
Joe?
Who wants to jump in about that?
Joe, what about the zoo trip? Are we going to talk about that or just hold off?
I thought we were, okay, are we doing the zoo along with the Shady Lane, or I thought it was one or the other? Okay.
Doing both.
Oh.
We can do both.
Okay, well, let's talk about the zoo then. What's our planned date for that? Who's organizing that particular event?
Well, I've kind of led that in the past. In the newsletter, and I was reminded that the question was, it was suggested for April, and I was questioning why April. I think Pat Lynch reminded me that somebody complained about being there in the hot weather in the summertime, and so they wanted to be there in a cooler time. Well, the trouble with April is a lot of the hoof stock isn't out, concessions aren't open, and the weather can still be iffy. We're in April now, and late April. I don't know if somebody's really firm on April, so be it. I think it'd be a much better experience if we do that sometime in May or maybe the first weekend in June after Memorial Day weekend.
Anybody have an idea?
It's up in the air. I'm not sure where to go with this in terms of.
Can we maybe see a show of hands of people that are interested in the zoo trip? Anybody?
Our Zoom hand.
I don't know how to do it. Yeah, I guess you raise your Zoom hand. Let's see how many folks might be interested. I'm one of them.
I think just about everybody raised their physical hand. We had a lot of hands. There's a lot of interest.
All right. Well, let's speculate on a date then in maybe May or early June. Now we've got the field trip to Chicago potentially in June, so May seems to be wide open at this point.
Well, there's a lot going on in May. We've got the weekend of the 14th is the PSA outing. The 28th, we have Digital Forum. Jeff, are you going to do Digital Forum on the 28th since that's Memorial Day weekend?
Yep. Yeah, we actually have a guest speaker coming.
Okay.
Possibly.
So May 21st would be open. Ken had suggested May 21st if you want to do it in May, or I would say June 4th, May 21st or June 4th.
Yeah. Either of those sound good to me.
Just do both.
So who would be leading this charge on the zoo event?
I've done it in past years. I mean, it's there's not a whole lot to it. It's send out the invitation, and people are there. They're going to do their own thing. We're not going around. Some people will buddy up, but sometimes we meet out by Evinrude, Lake Evinrude, and have lunch together. If the weather's decent, and it has been, in past years when we've done the summertime.
Then Brian, I think it's up to you to tell us what's the best day to work with your schedule, and we'll join if we can.
June 4th, is best. I think. I think that's before school is out. Is that correct? Does anybody here still have children in school, or just grandchildren in school?
Now, mine are still in school, so.
I just don't know when school ends yet. we
Usually
made it through spring break. That's all I know.
Let's go with June 4th. I would.
Okay, June 4th is our tentative zoo outing, and we'll have a month or more to outline exactly what we're going to be doing. Any
Is
other
that 9
questions?
a.m.? Are we doing that at meeting at 9, or is that when they open, or is it 10?
I'll have to check, Jeff. No, they'll be open before 10.
I think we always met at 9.
You open at 9:30.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, we've got a month or more yet to nail all of the details down. How's that? Ellen, was there anything else I needed to bring up for that particular couple of topics?
No, I just was concerned about getting those set for the schedule. So that's
Okay.
good.
All right. Well, as I indicated, we got a big event coming up here pretty soon, and that's the Wacko Spring Competition. Who wants to outline all the details about that? Jeff,
I can, I
Ken,
guess.
or- Okay.
Yeah, the Wacko Competition closes April 17th at midnight. So you need to get all your images in. If you've never uploaded anything to a Wacko Competition, just a reminder that it takes 24 to 48 hours for us to approve you. So think about that if you haven't entered. It'd be great if you'd enter. We have 8 divisions. There's the 2 special themes are Wisconsin landscape for the nature special theme and tabletop still life for the open special theme. Otherwise, we have limited color open, limited mono open, monochrome open, color open, nature open, and monochrome nature open. So you can enter 3 images in each of those divisions. Each division costs $4 to enter. There are instructions on the Wacko website for entering. And if you have any questions or problems, you just need to see either email Ken or myself, and we'll be glad to answer. We're getting a good amount of people entering, but there's only, 2 weeks left? Something like that.
Yeah.
So get your images in. Don't be a last minute one.
Is there any other news in Wacko and PSA that anyone wants to bring up?
Let's see, digital forum in Wacko for the month of April. Oh, and I just forgot the guy's name. Let me pull my. I got it. It's not a name that is easy to remember, but we have a guest speaker in April. His name is Mike Mazel, Muzel, something like that. He is going to talk about storm photography and volcano photography. We'll be doing an interview with him. I'm waiting for a second confirmation from him, and then we'll get you his website and such. But Digital Forum meets on the fourth Saturday of the month, so it's the fourth Saturday in April from 10 o'clock till noon. The special speaker, Mike, will be on at 11 o'clock to 12. The first hour from 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock, we take general questions that you may have, problems that you have in photography, whatever. We'll try to answer them during that hour show.
Okay.
Other than that, that's, I think, about all we have going for Wacko. We don't have any field trips going yet, and we haven't worked on any for the next any seminars yet. More
Okay.
stuff will be happening with the digital forum, though.
All right. The next topic is show and tell. We have Pat Lynch and Linnea Koenigs this evening. And as a reminder, next month we have Roger Krill and Bernard Hall. So let's do this evening, Pat or Linnea, whichever one jumps first. You're up. Share your screen and let it go.
I can do it.
All right.
Assume you see that?
See it, Al.
There you go. Okay. I kind of did a potluck here in photographs. Went through my photos and thought I'd just do a little variety. This one here is from our last Raptor shoot at Schlitz Audubon with the Wacko. It wasn't a bad day, a little sunny, would have preferred a little more overcast, but we could make it work. And this shot of the eagle, he was looking pretty good. And of course, that crow, he wouldn't turn around. He kept his back to us the whole time. And then, of course, this guy. Now, what I did is I tried an overlay with this one here for the background to kind of cut out the rest of the background. But I think I'm going to redo this and make the background a little lighter because it blends too much with the bird, I think. But that's for another day.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the hawks. And of course, this guy, I always like this owl. And now this one here, last October, my wife, myself, my sister-in-law, and brother-in-law, we took a ride down to Atlanta to see some friends. And in their backyard every morning, they get this guy and a monarch butterfly. So I was out there taking pictures of this every morning we were down there. We were down there for a couple of days, and then we started driving up the east coast of the States, coming back home. And this guy was out there, so I got a shot of him. And of course, the monarch. There was a couple of them that were there. And then we went to a wildlife zoo that takes animals that have been either abused or no longer can survive in a regular zoo. They're a little too wild for it, and they put them into this zoo. And this is one of the baboons that was there. And then they had a whole corral of these big turtles. These guys were huge. Oh, and then we were on one of the islands up, I think around South Carolina, lighthouse, but I had a very, very sunny day, very bright. And there was a river walkway there that we went to, spent a little time. And then we get out to the pier in South Carolina. This is the USS Laffey along with the aircraft carrier. And we got to get onto the deck of the aircraft carrier, and they have some planes tied down. All of it's not decommissioned right now, so none of it works. And there's a little look at the bay here with that submarine, which is really, really rusty. They're going to be working on doing some restoration on this, but I don't think I'd want to take this out at all. This was the USS, the battleship Missouri, which is, or I'm sorry, the battleship North Carolina. This is the front 3 guns that were on this thing, which were pretty big. Actually, people could fit into those turrets, and you can actually walk through the turrets to see what's going on in there. Some more lighthouses, because we're on the coast. We got a couple more to go to. So at least I had some overcast for this. Oh, we were in Williamsburg, and we were walking through the city. I was sitting on a bench resting, and I looked down and I saw this. So I thought, well, I'm just going to take a picture of this with the wide angle lens. And then this is through a field we were driving that was unique to the Revolutionary War, where certain battles were going on. As we're driving through the road, I saw this and they stopped the car. Everybody was wondering why I stopped the car, but I ran out to get some pictures of this. And there was another section there too. And then we made it up to Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's house. This is the walkway they take you up to go in to see the house. And you can walk around the grounds. And this is the back side of the house, or the front side, I guess, how you look at it. And this one here I included because there's a little story behind this one. A couple of years ago, I bought a neutral density filter, a 10 millimeter or a 10D. And I went up to the falls to try and take some pictures. So I ended up with this. Well, this picture now is a wall mural at the BMO Harris Bank on Appleton Avenue, just east of Pilgrim Road. So they have it on their wall there. And that's all I got.
Nice, very
Thank you.
nice.
Well done.
Thank you. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Okay,
Lynnea?
well, yes, I'll go. My name is Linnea, and human resource manager by day and obsessed with camera photography. Pat, your photos were amazing, and every time I've seen these show and tell, I'm so impressed with what I see. And you're
Well,
not
thank
going
you.
to see that from me, but you're going to see some learning lessons, and hopefully it's going to work. So let's see if I can do this. Okay. Now I have 2 screens. Can you see a photography of local bands?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. So
Good.
my husband and I have a band. We started in 2011, and everybody in the band has talent except myself. So way back in the day, I started shooting and always kept the camera on auto. So the band name that we have is Vinyl Road. We played out, my gosh, for 10 years, over 125 shows, and this is them, but it's us. I tell them what to do, so it's my band. So probably in 2013, we had our first benefit, and this is my husband, and I had my Canon T3i, and I shot this. The band after us, Electric Beatniks, Billy shot their band just because I like shooting. So Billy liked the photos. Therefore, he asked me to do a photo shoot for his other band. And I thought, well, heck yeah, I like music, I'll do it. Oh my gosh, I walked into the bar, dark. All they had was red, green, and blue lighting. I'm still shooting in auto at that time. So this is all about experience. And what can be troublesome in shooting bands? Everything. So going forward, the photo shoot that I was hired first to do, I have no pictures left of it. So they must have been really bad because I've destroyed them. So if you look, this is friends of ours. Here, the lighting of the band makes all the difference in the world. Females blown out, no lighting on the guy. This gentleman, actually, there's a band in Milwaukee that travels around that does The Who. This gentleman here is the most phenomenal singer, and he does Roger Daltrey perfectly. During this shoot, he actually uses a can light that aims always right up at his belly. And so I asked him if he would mind doing it towards his face. Well, he did, and it's blown out. So photography or photographing them is very difficult. Here, another band, purple and green. Everybody was purple and green. And with Lightroom, you can do some work, but during this time, this is our band on Bub's stage. And as you can see here, the lighting is so uneven. At this time, I had Bald, very talented singer, and he's so blown out, you can't even work with a photo. This is George. He's a fantastic singer. Actually like the photo, but again, it's probably not the most natural photo color that you would choose to have in a photograph. The other thing that can get in the way are obstacles. This one isn't a good representation, and this actually isn't a photo I used, but I usually get rid of all the bad photos. I was surprised to see how many bad ones I still have left. But the microphone stand. When I shot that first band and I walked into the bar and everything was red and blue, this is a gentleman who I shot. His name is Jerry Unger. Jerry and Nora play around quite often. He has hired me a few times, which I was really kind of surprised. And during this time, I knew nothing about Phil Flash. So for 2 hours, their photo shoots were wonderful. Then the sun started shining, or I'm sorry, the sun direction, and the pictures just got worse from here. This again, one thing that's interesting when you're shooting bands, guitarists, when they're playing lead, often look down. So if ever you have a family of 5 and you're trying to take a photo, then you try to shoot a live band. It's ridiculous, not ridiculous, I'm sorry, it's a challenge. Drummers, a lot of times you don't see the drummer. Trying to get them, if they're not on the stand, is very difficult. This shot was taken at Richfield Days. I believe this is all natural light because I don't think I was using flash during this time. And again, this is a horrible photo. I wouldn't use it for anything. It's just representation. But oftentimes I'm working around poles and pillars. Again, now I probably wouldn't take this shot, but I always like to try and get a crowd to make it look like the band actually has fans. Microphone cord, even with Lightroom, I couldn't, well, my skills would not fix that. But again, I just take a different shot. This one, we were playing at Barking and Barton. This tent wound up blowing completely over during the show. We grabbed equipment. But if you're trying to get a photo shoot, if you're paid to do photos, the environment is horrible. And if you're not standing directly in this angle, you've got these poles and then cement blocks around it. Here you have somebody's lovely PVC. I'm sorry, it works fine, but when you're looking at the photographer, it's not about the band, it's all about what photos I can take. So it's all about me, really. This location, if you've never been to Builda's in Hubertus for like a Thursday, or actually they're doing it now Saturday and Sunday afternoon, wonderful live music. We're going to be there twice this summer. Where they have the band though is up right as you walk into the entrance. And it's a great location for it, but not if you're the photographer. I swear my husband hides behind the pillar all the time on purpose. You just can't get a good band shot there. This gentleman was at Cedarburg Wine and Harvest Festival, and this actually, it almost works with the blue and the blue. But during that photo shoot, there were 5 different cars behind him. Just, they were parked their stage was right next to that. Washington County Fair, you get a little bit closer. You often have very dirty tents. Again, not a good photo at all. This was in my junk pile. And then you have people. People often get in the way of trying to shoot the band, but you know, that's a good thing to have. We had an outdoor event, never even thought, they said we were out on a balcony, never even thought about this worn out tarp, no front lighting, didn't even think to bring it. And also due to the size of the way the band spread out, I had to be this far back. Whatever, I think that's the only photo I took and said, okay, forget it. Microphone. This is when you're starting off going, okay, I need to take your picture, stand against the wall. So just even the art of posing people. State Fair, I so wanted to go up and fix the back of that tent. I hated that. But again, it's not about me, even though I think it is in the photos. But that drove me crazy, as well as the microphone, but you just got to keep shooting. I think anytime I shoot a band, there's like about 400 pictures taken, 250 at least are garbaged. So this is better band photography, but it's nothing like what I've seen the members of this club put out. This photo actually didn't work. It's the Hitman. It was in color. I converted it to black and white. It's blurry, it's out of focus, but I like their smiles. And in the original, you can still see the saxophone. So for me, that worked. The Love Monkeys I'll shoot for. Again, this is not an ideal photo. It's blown out. But what I love for the bands, the action of the photos. You've got the lasers, usually, which work really well with fog, and then the color of the lights. This I like just with his expression. In the original photo, you'll see more of the guitar, which is also red, and just with the logo of the band. Microphone, I'm fine with on this one of the few. This also too, this is kind of cropped with the presentation, but I liked his intensity and I like the green lighting reflecting, but still their faces you can see. This is one of our singers. She's blown out, but I still like that photo. I could probably touch it up, you know, to give her some more color, but I love that photo. And this is a gentleman who was at a saloon on Calhoun. This photo again, too, is more cropped in this presentation. This one I really liked. Peter Gabriel, if ever anybody likes Prince, this gentleman is one of the most fantastic musicians. And this is flat. I would definitely rework it, but this one was a great photo. They're actually squatted down, and I had never seen their performance before, so that I caught this was great. But again, it's not, I mean, I would reprocess it. Steve Grimm from the Bad Boy. Again, Love Monkeys. I like this one. In the original, you can see the keyboard. Normally, if you would just see the shot, you wouldn't know what he's doing, but in the context of the Love Monkey photo shoot, you know, you can tell. And I just like the focus on that. This is Dr. Snake Oil. I like it because it's at a Harley event. You can see the Harley colors, you can see the guitar, the motorcycle, as well as his tattoos. To me, that one just worked. This gentleman, Ozaki County Jam Band. Again, the photo's cropped by the presentation, but you just look like him as a musician and you've got winning shots. The lighting was absolutely perfect. No front light red colors. It was all white light. This one I like just because you have a couple dancing and you can see the silhouette. But I always, whenever I see him, it's like, can I take your picture? Because he's just so cool. This photo shoot was when I was hired to go to Uncle Bob's, which is a music store in Milwaukee. I don't even know if they're still in business. And this gentleman has since passed. And the first band that I shot, and then you saw the guy with the sun bar across his face, hired me again, I don't know why, to do this. And these shots was the first day that I stepped outside of auto and had to go to manual, because I'm sitting there with my camera going, this isn't going to work. So fortunately, I was able to salvage some. I mean, there were some good shots. This one I like, just the expressions. Again, Love Monkeys just because it's their stage. Their stage is expensive. And this I like just because you see emotion and you see the color lighting. These shots, this is the only famous person I've ever shot, Lita Ford. She was in the Runaways way back in the day, as well as she sang with Ozzy Osbourne. And this was just Milwaukee Harley, and I had the honor, I'm sorry, I didn't have the honor. I took her photo without her knowing. So I call it the honor of having her photos. And then again, this is our band. I just like it with the wind. You can tell she just finished a song. The two women, I made eye contact with them, so they looked at me. Steve Grimm and Penny, I like their emotion there. Microphone's not in the way. And then this is just our bass player. You know, I called up to him and he looked at us, you know, and again. But along with shooting the bands, especially for the Love Monkeys in our bands, I also have to shoot the audience. So when I go to shoot them, I'm carrying 2 cameras because I have a long lens so I can telephoto, but then I have my shorter lens with a flash unit. So only by being forced, because I shoot bands, to getting out of auto, to learning how to do fill flash, this one doesn't have a fill flash, but taking these, but then somebody will go, hey, quick, take my photo while you're this, or while you're shooting the band. So I'm looking for another alternative to carrying 2 big cameras around my neck. Help me. And again, these are just more band pictures that I've shot for during the event, because Love Monkeys and us as well, you just try to sell the experience that you can have, you know, fun. And then finally, I think this is my last one. So we were the headliners at Heartland last year. And so these 4 and this one is our band. This gentleman used to be in our band. And this is a lovely young woman who's got a great voice, she's local to Heartland. So she jumped up and sang with us for a couple songs. But getting my band together for just a band shot is also, it's like taking five toddlers and say, okay, smile at me, I need to take your photo. So because of this meeting, I always call our Menomonee Falls Camera Club a class for me, because everyone I learned from, and I don't even like the coloring, but anyway, so starting to learn about the Photoshop and the cutting, this is the same photo, and I got rid of these 2. So this is the band shot that I'll send out when we do promos. You can still see fringing, but I'm okay with that. Okay, I'll just say it's band lighting. So this is kind of like my life with, I love shooting everything, but I thought this would be something just a little bit different to share. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well done. Well done.
Well done indeed.
I love the struggle.
It's real. It still is. It's real.
And some of those photos turned out very nice.
Oh, thank you.
There's-
I am such a work in progress.
Yeah.
Well, keep progressing. Very good. Tonight, I'm going to show next the monthly challenge. Let me bring up my screen and get this rolling. Now, where are we? Not yet. Come on. All right. All right, that's that. One of the topics that we discussed about doing was, what do we do with the photos that we take? And before our speaker, we've got about 10 minutes. I was wondering if people would like to volunteer and just give us some ideas of what you do with your pictures. Anyone want to jump in? We know what Lynnea does with hers. She puts together nice little shows about the bands. Anyone else?
Make calendars every year and give them to our family.
Okay. Do many of you, go ahead.
Yeah, Tony. I take family gatherings, the holidays, birthdays, and then our vacations, and then some of the photos around where we live, and I put them into slideshows, and put them on DVD. Not that I know I don't know what I'm going to do with them later on, but that's what I do.
Do many of you put together photo books for trips you've taken or to share with families, things of that nature?
Yeah, I do a yearly photo book of flowers, and I do a yearly photo book of non-flowers. I do a yearly photo book of my daughter. So I do 3 books a year.
All right.
For special occasions, I put together our 50th anniversary celebration in a large album. Rather than make a book, what I did is I used I bought the album where you can slide the 4x6 sides in there, but then in some of the other 4x6s, I would write information about what was going on, only because sometimes things change. Sometimes people may want to add things, and at times I feel that some of the books can get very expensive when you start uploading them. And if somebody says, oh, but that's not how I spell my name, you're up a creek, and this way I only have to fix a 4x6 card. So, and it works out a lot better. And that someday maybe I will make a full book of it. So, it's pretty
something that was I had it in my closet. I'm lost it right now, but it was I did they used to sell at Walgreens these little 4x6 fold out where you could put like 36 pictures or something in there. Years ago, I did probably a dozen of those for different family members before we got to high-tech digital stuff. And I'm one of 9 kids, so we shared a lot of pictures in those days. But when I talked to my siblings, maybe after 10, 15 years ago, they've still got those books and they still look and ask me questions about them. So I do believe pictures do tell a story, and they keep going year after year after year, depending on what you do with them, I guess. I'm looking here at Ken's picture. He's got some beautiful stuff hanging on the wall. I'm sure those are from contests that he's won or things of that nature. You can look at my back wall. I've got pictures of my grandchild and, things of that nature. So I think a lot of people do something with their pictures. I personally have done some fairly large things, 24, 36 by 48. I know Jeff Ewing's done a couple of really big, beautiful pictures that he has hanging in his basement from his trips up north. But pictures do tell a tale. And I think one day somebody's probably going to appreciate what you've done over the years. Yeah, Ken?
I did something different this year. I did this once before, but I took some of my pictures of Bond Falls and I had them printed on cloth, and I had asked my sister to make a quilt out of it.
Oh, wow.
So I have, let's see, it's 15 photos. It's 5 photos per section. One of them is spring, summer, one is fall, and one is winter. It's all together as one large quilt that's hanging above my couch. I tried to see if I could find it quick, and I can't find it right now.
Yeah, Joe, one thing I've done is I've done family history books, photo books, going back to my father, actually my grandfather, starting with his life and both grandparents, and then through my parents and all their siblings. And I did one book that goes up until I left home, after college. And then I did a second book. It's my life, basically on my own as an adult. So it's like history books. It just, the one that goes back to grandparents, I've printed copies and shared that with many people throughout the family circles.
Okay. Anyone else?
Brian, you had mentioned that you make a PDF of your books.
Yeah.
What service are you using for that, or who do you give it to then to be printed?
I've been using Blurb.
Okay.
Just because, it's works in nicely with Lightroom. You create your book in Lightroom, and Lightroom gives you the opportunity to export directly to Blurb. And you can then request a PDF from Blurb of your book. Then you can share that with anybody.
Thank you.
Jeff, Joe, I did find my photo. If I could do a quick share screen, I can show it to you guys.
Oh, sure. I'd love to.
Can you see that?
Oh, yeah. Wow. Now, that's really cool. Now, you're saying this is made out of cloth?
Yeah. Each, it's got the 3 sections, and so I put everything together in Photoshop, and basically did it in thirds. So each third is one piece of cloth, and then my sister sewed it together, and then put the border around it, and so it turned out pretty well.
Those pictures, is it kind of like printed on like a t-shirt type material?
It's a cotton material.
Looks really cool. I like that.
Yeah, I had one done a few years ago that I had one of my egrets done, and I've got that hanging downstairs too.
I've got to ask you a naive question. What's this place called? Bond Falls?
Yeah. Yeah, I thought I'd pick a place that I like to go to.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think it's about, go ahead.
Oh, I just was going to say a couple years ago, maybe a decade ago, I had it printed on a fleece material and made a blanket or something to throw over the couch. But this was, one of them was couple of them. One was just one big solid picture and another one I combined pictures, but I haven't done that in a couple of years because
Yeah.
all of a sudden I don't have the time anymore.
Well, back before the digital days, I did a lot of slides, and I went through those a couple of years ago and pulled out probably 250 or so and had converted to digital. So those will be around for my kids one day. And nowadays, all the families have pictures every other day with their iPhones, but back in those days, you did it with slides. So now they have a copy, at least digitally, of what they did when they were younger, with a whole lot less pictures than the kids take today, I'll tell you. All right, I think it's 8 o'clock. Let's see if we can bring our guest, Hank Erdmann. Are you
what
in
timing,
I'm
Joe?
here.
Is that him?
I'm
Yep,
me.
that's it.
All right. Well, welcome, Hank.
Thank you.
Let me just read a little dissertation here about the fella. Found out who he is and what he does. The first thing, I think he's from Chicago. So I don't know if that's good or bad, but we'll take it for what it's Frank is a photographer, an educator, and a writer. He's photographed throughout North America, making the Midwest his primary geographic area. Loves history, especially the maritime history of the Great Lakes. Has an interest in the ports, the shorelines, the islands, the hardwood forests, the prairies, and other natural areas surrounding Lake Michigan and Lake Superior. And you're going to tell us tonight about photography. Does it have to be representational or artistic? And you say, we don't have to choose. So why don't you tell us why we don't have to choose? And welcome.
Well, thank you. That's not the show I'm giving, though. That's a great idea for a show. In fact, I think I did a blog on that not too recently, but I have been giving a program I call 11 Senses, and using your 11 senses for in composing images. And over the years, that show has grown quite long. It runs an hour and a half plus. So I split it in two. And what I talked to Jeff about when we set this up was doing the second half of that using what I call your 6 artistic senses. And we'll talk about that in length. And this all came out of oh God, I've been in one camera club for over 40 years. But the clubs I belong to, I do a lot of presentations for, and they would say, well, how do you see that stuff? And I think I'm pretty observant, but a friend of mine who is into photographing reflections in raindrops really can see stuff. So between the two of us, we started thinking about, well, let's put together a show on this, and it eventually became my show. So it basically, how I go out there and find images, and I really don't look for stuff. I pay attention and react to things that catch my attention. So I am going to pull this show up. I can find it. There it is. I thought I had it up before. Now there it is. Oh. Give me 1 second here. This is a program called Photodex Pro Show Gold, and unfortunately, they went defunct. They went out of business. I don't know what that says, but so it's not supported anymore, and it gives me fits. And I don't know why, but when I go on Zoom meetings or go to meetings or something, that kind of software, it doesn't seem to want to advance for me. So I'm just kind of drawing it out close to full screen instead of going to full screen. So it seems to work this way. So if it's not advancing, let me know. I always ask for people if they want to get my blog, which is free.
Yeah, you're not sharing yet, Hank.
Oh, that is my fault. Hang on a second. There we go. Okay, we got it now?
Yep.
Okay.
Now we see your show.
Yeah, so I do not ever contribute to spam. I never trade, sell, share, give away, whatever, email information. So I do like to make that statement. But if you want to get a blog that never touches on software or digital processing things, I use all that, but I'm not the guy to talk about it. This is strictly on the art of photography, sometimes on art itself, and composition. Those are my main topics. So, for instance, the show I'm going to give you, I did separate blogs in each of the 6 main points in here. So that's the kind of thing I do for what it's worth. I don't have a sheet to pass around because we're not in person. But if you're interested, Jeff's got my email, and just have to send me an email. Say, add me to your blog. You can unsubscribe anytime, and you'll get it, until you no longer want it. A little quick background is I came out of a commercial career. I worked for companies like AT&T and McDonald's as staff photographer. I shot pictures of a lot of switching stations and products. And I also worked for a switch manufacturing company for 10 years. And then I shot people stuffing their faces at lots of McDonald's restaurants. It was an education, but what got me into photography is actually my dad was a printer, and I worked for him for a few years and got into the photographic end of printing. And that led me to a career in photography. It's 40 some years now. But nature was always what floated my boat, so to speak. And experience nature versus just seeing it is what brings us to really cherish it. And like many guys, I mean, you talk to, or you read Galen Rowell's books. He was a mechanic and a rock climber, and he started taking pictures to document his climbing. And they said, "Hey, you're pretty good at this," and he made quite a career out of it. And a lot of guys started that way. They'll be naturalists or something like that, and they'll use photography, and next thing you know, photography is kind of taken over, which is okay. So if we pay attention to the premise here is we pay attention to our 5 human senses: vision, hearing, touch, smell, and taste, and our 6 artistic or psychological senses: feeling as in internal feelings, beauty, mystery, awareness, contrast, and simplicity. Our photographs can start to match our awe and love for the natural world or whatever we're shooting, and share those feelings with those who view our images. At some point, we realize we need to know more than the technical stuff. I mean, I taught, well, I'm still teaching, but I've been teaching for almost the whole time, 35, almost the 40 years. And it always amazed me because we started a program at the local arboretum in the Chicago western suburbs called Morton Arboretum, pretty famous place. And it was really one of the best programs of its kind until they sabotaged it. That's another story. Long story short, they decided that space was better put to corporate meetings and weddings. It made more money for them. But we had a really good program going, and I taught the intro class as one of the main things I taught. And one of the things I noticed is that when we got people out of a technical or scientific background, they had no problem with the technical stuff. And this is back in, we started the first 12 years of that program, it was all film. And then it slowly switched over to digital. But those folks had no problem with the technical side. When we got people from the other side of the aisle that came in and were naturalists or artists of some kind, or just hobby photographers, they had no problem with the aesthetic end of things, or less problem, but they struggled with the technological stuff. So that's always been an interesting point with me, is that we think of it that way, and you can learn you can take and get a book. You can get Shaw's books or any number of photographic manuals these days, especially with digital, and it's really, exposure is so cut and dried. If you can learn to read a graph called a histogram, you can literally master exposure. I can go out and shoot just one frame of everything I shoot, and I know I would get the exposure I want. I might not get the image I want, and that's why I still bracket quite a bit, but I'm bracketing for composition, or something's going on like waves lapping on a lakeshore. But I you really don't have to worry about the technical exposure part of the stuff anymore. So if we learn enough to be proficient on the technical side with our equipment and software later, we can kind of just ignore that side and let that do our work for us. I wouldn't recommend that. I think you're going to miss out on some stuff, especially on what I'm going to be talking about shortly, on the feeling end, trying to translate the feelings that you get with your pictures. But you literally can do that. That's how cut and dried exposure has become. So as we progress in our artistic life and we grow as an artist, we start making the effort to learn more on the aesthetic side of things, learn composition, and less on the mechanical and technical side. I mean, I really don't think too much about exposure anymore. I mean, I shoot a picture and look at a histogram and make adjustments with that. If I'm shooting something rarely like animals or birds, I'm not a wildlife shooter. I'm a landscape photographer. But when I do that, I will usually switch to live view so I can look at a histogram, or just shoot a picture and adjust it for there, and then shoot aperture priority. I started out learning, I shot manual. I still shoot manually because that's what I understand. It's it's just ingrained in me. So we're going to start looking at the compositional end, and then we see, well, you make a plans, especially if you don't do this for a living. I mean, most of the guys I used to hang around with when I started going seriously into stock photography, we'd go to a place, an area, and we'd camp out for a week and maybe longer until we got what we wanted. We'd wait for the weather. When I was working in corporate, you couldn't do that. You had to pick your places. Oh, I'm going to go to, say, Starved Rock, which is south of us. It's a neat state park in central Illinois. You're going to pick a date and a time you're going to go. So, but too often we get locked into that mentality of, we're going to go to a place, we're going to document this or that, we're going to look for this subject or that. For instance, we'll go out to the Mississippi River. Lock and Dam is near the Quad Cities. That was a really big thing starting mid 2000s in the Chicago area. And I'm sure it's been pretty big for folks in your area as well, because below the lock and dams, there's open water and the eagles would come in there to fish. With global climate change, the water's always open now, it seems. But they're still out there. It's a great place to go to shoot eagles. There's other things to photograph. Or I say I'm going to go up to the UP to photograph fall colors. Well, certainly you're going to get lots of pictures, lots of different subject matter, but there are other things to shoot up there. I'm going to go to Door County, which is one of my favorite places in the whole world. I've been teaching at the Clearing up in Ellison Bay, which is a folk school, for 26 years now, for a long time. It's kind of become my home away from home. And our best friends now live up there. So we have a free place to stay, which is really nice. So I'm going to go up there. I'm going to shoot ice shots. But if we doggedly stick just to the plan we put in mind and blindly go, I'm going to shoot that, whatever the initial quest was. Rarely do you make really great photographs unless the conditions are fabulous when you get there. So we went to Starved Rock early in my career. This is shot on Kodachrome 25 film, long time ago. And we wanted to shoot ice falls. And this is when I was first starting out. And the light was just putrid. It was deep overcast. That wasn't good light for any film, but especially wasn't good for Kodachrome. And I made, a technically good image compositionally, but it's pretty ugly. It's mine, so I can assail it. I wouldn't do that in a critique, but that really is ugly. But if we go and the light's good and the subject matter's there, and we shoot what nature is giving us and pay less attention to what we want to shoot. So this is another trip. We went down there. Yeah, we had water or ice falls in mind, but we were going to take what was there. The ice falls weren't as it probably was earlier in the year in this second shot, and they weren't formed up quite as nice. But I shot what I think is a much better picture by using what was happening on that day. One of the first things I did, it wasn't even professional. I didn't get paid for it. It was a volunteer situation. And boy, do I wish I knew then what I know now. I did a 12-season photo show for Kankakee River State Park, which is south of me by about an hour. As a volunteer, I had a tripod. I rarely used it. Now I wouldn't think of doing something like that. And I shot a lot of midday light stuff. And it's putrid. It's just, that light is not just conducive. We can get away with that a little bit more now with digital media. We can control it more. It's still, it's pretty harsh stuff. Midday light that's when I go scout. I look for some things, unless it's overcast. So I also pay a lot of attention now, especially to how things make me feel emotionally when I'm walking around. So mid-career, before I stopped shooting film, I shot a lot of 4x5 film. And Point Beach State Forest is one of my favorite places to camp out. If I go up to Door, I'll take an extra day, go halfway up, shoot on the way up, shoot there at sunrise. And I was shooting on the shore of Lake Michigan, looking out across the water, and beautiful sunrise, and just kind of that, extra sense of peripheral vision. I started backing up to adjust the camera. And if you could tip this picture down a 1/4 inch, you would see my boot heel print. I almost ruined this. And I kind of just turned around and saw this beautiful textural shot with gull tracks going through it. At first, I didn't know they were gull tracks, and still I looked at all the gulls around walking and saw what they were imprinting. But the thing that caught my mind, even before I set up on this, which was almost immediate, was that they walk in line like they're taking a sobriety test. Interesting. But this picture just screams texture. It's warm, cool light balance. It's just neat stuff. I have a 24x30 print hanging in my family room, or the living room of this, because it's just gorgeous. That's kind of things that they just grab me. Vision may be our main receptor, but it's easily skewed without other central input. We're up, I've got a class at the Clearing. We're at Peninsula State Park. If you go to Sven's Bluff on Skyline Drive or Skyline Road, whatever they call it, one of the pull-offs is called Sven's Bluff. And we're sitting up there. There's a neat little S curve you can shoot of the shoreline. Shot that so many times I don't want to think about it. And I get this wonderful aroma. It's obviously a spring class. It was one of the last spring classes I did until this year when I retired. And Mike, the director there, asked me, he said, "You want to do a second class like you used to?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So maybe we'll get back to doing this. But anyhow, they have about 100 yards downhill from Sven's Bluff, if you're going towards the Fish Creek entrance. They're the site of one of the first settlers before it was ever a park. I don't remember if it was Clayfin or one of those guys. But at one point that property sold and sold and sold again. And somebody planted lilies of the valley. They're not native, they're Eurasian flowers. And they've naturalized in the environment. There are literally acres and acres and acres of them. And if you ever bent down and smelled a lily of the valley, it's a gorgeous aroma. But when you've got acres of them, it just wafts uphill at you. And I smelled this and I told the group, I said, "I'll be right back. I think I found something, but I got to go look." And sure enough, I walked downhill and I saw all these leaves backlit. And we've been back there half a dozen times to photograph this. Neat thing to shoot. But smell found that image for me. Too few of us, we head out to shoot a thing or a place, and we get so focused into doing that, we don't really take time sometimes to look at things that we notice. I've got in a very good habit, at least for a photographer. It's not a good habit for driving, by the way, but it's a good habit for a photographer that when I notice something, I look at it because I know there's a reason that I noticed it. So this is a man-made plantation in the Arboretum, in Morton Arboretum in DuPage County. And it's not one of those things, it's a monoculture. It's not one of those things that resource managers like, unless you're in the logging industry. But it's there. It was, when it was planted, that was the way they did things, I guess. But with a fresh snow on there, it just looks like the whole place is full of snow feathers. Just cool place. Filled the frame with it. So in short, we kind of forget, and some people never really do realize that when we go out and see something, when we look at something, we're doing a lot more than just seeing it. We're experiencing it. Because we have a brain. We're not just looking at something like a camera does. And sometimes I get some odd views when I'm giving this in person. Like I'm, talking voodoo or something, but it's really true. And I've really focused myself or taught myself just to pay attention to things when I'm walking around. When we get into the 6 points, I'll talk a lot more about that. So think about it. You go outside, you a beautiful sunset. This is from the Clearing Beach. A lot of people don't realize that the Clearing has a beach. It's all stones, all rocks. It's not comfy to walk on, but it's a neat place to watch the setting sun over Ellison Bay. And I saw this sign, and I really got into for a while of using negative space or non-subject matter space in a photograph. So the moon is really small in here. And it's exactly what really caught my eye was the progression of the glow from blue to orange to blue, and just that peaceful, mellow feeling that it gives you. And then the moon was just a bonus. And I use this exact picture in a lot of shows to say, good night, go in peace, whatever. So it's my ending greeting. It works great. Think about it. You're on a lake. This is Council Lake up in the Hiawatha, a place I've been to far too many times. I still get good images there, but you can hear the silence of a tranquil lake. I had a group up there. I used to run a workshop and tour company, and we had a group up there, and I'm staring at this thing. We always get there really early because it's really popular. We're all on the shore waiting for the sun to come up. And as the light came up, it was foggy. There was no sunrise, but this is just such a neat picture. And I'm just staring at it. One of the guys in the group says, "Aren't you going to shoot this?" And I go, oh yeah. I mean, I was just so mesmerized by it. This is another one that I have a large print of this hanging in the dining room. Just makes me feel good. Think about it. You're taking in the musty aroma of a wet autumn forest. You're experiencing it. In fact, that's how I found that picture. You're feeling the wind blowing across the grasses on a Great Lake shore. This is up Pictured Rocks. You're experiencing it. This is a horrible picture, but still, I can taste and smell the salt spray of the Pacific Ocean. I can feel these waves crashing the shore. I can still feel how that shook. Sadly, it was vacation and it was midday light into that shooting trip, but you're not just seeing things, you're experiencing. That's the first premise of this program. And how are we experiencing it? Through our 11 senses. And I did say 11. I'm going to just run through the human ones, and I'm not going to touch on them because that's part of the first part. And it makes the show pretty long. But again, there's sight, smell, touch, hearing, and taste. And you'd be surprised how often you can actually taste something out there or get the attitude of taste. I've got a picture that's in the other show that shows a sycamore tree, which is white bark, and it's in front of a red maple tree. And the only thing I could think of at looking at that, and I'm framing that picture up, was spaghetti and noodles. Not really taste, but it works for me. But we're going to talk about our 6 artistic and psychological senses, feeling as internal feelings of the heart, of the soul, beauty, mystery, awareness, contrast, and simplicity. Speaking of Bond Falls, I saw that picture. That was very cool. That collage of Bond Falls. It's also one of my favorite places. We're there, obviously, you're going to photograph the falls. You're going to photograph pieces of it, reflections. And I'm looking around and I see these foam dots. And as I looked at the foam dots, which are a natural phenomenon from falling water, all of a sudden I saw the reflections. And I'm going, whoa, there is the image. And I made a shot of just the reflection, the trees and the rocks at the top of the frame, a very abstract image, and I like it, but I like this one a little bit more. It just adds a little bit more information. Neither is wrong or right. They're different representations of the same place. But we do this and we can hope to impart the feeling that I got at looking at it in the image to other people. And this has been published on calendars and all over the place. I might argue that if somebody doesn't have wonderment of a given subject, that person can't feel as much as the maker did in making it. So this is a place, it's a huge place called Des Plaines River Fish and Wildlife Area. It's about 20 minutes south of me. At the confluence of the Des Plaines and Kankakee River. It's where the Illinois River forms from those 2 other rivers. And they plant a lot of sunflowers there because it's also a big hunting area. And the doves like to come in to feed on these in the fall, and then they get blasted. Whatever. But I think they're unbelievably cool photographically. Singularly or in mass. They're just a neat thing. They're fun to photograph. And we go down there every year. It brings to mind the old saying, photograph what you love, and that will come through in your imagery. And I do truly believe that. And I always joke, I shouldn't photograph cats. Just kidding. I have a dog. I'm not a cat guy. But that's a joke. So if the image maker's sense of wonder and excitement is great, and expressed as well in their images, even the person who thinks Roughing It is Motel 6 and Nirvana is Disneyland may pick up a little bit on that wonder and that excitement. At least I hope so. And that's pretty much the way I've seen things through the years. there's always, when you're doing a show, or you're doing a show and tell, or you're doing I do a lot of non-competitive critiques for clubs that I know of. And you always know when an image is going to, if it was being scored or it's going to do well, it's going to get a good critique. If you get that audible sense, that ooh sound when an image comes up, that's kind of the nailing of it. I like to use a lot of quotes in my shows too. So there's a great quote from Mr. Adams: "The artist and the photographer seek the mysteries and adventure of experience in nature." And that's what Ansel was doing too. He got involved as a kid in photography. He was going to be a concert pianist, and he was good enough to be it. It wasn't his personality, his sense of whatever. It was too of a staid career for him. But he was really, really a good pianist and played right up until his death. But he said the same thing. It's experience that we're getting, and that's what led him to go away from a career in music and into photography. So let's take a look at our senses really quick. Like I said, I ran through the physical ones, the human ones. We're going to go through the 6 next points. And this is one of those images that was caught with peripheral vision. I photograph a lot, or used to. We don't see as much of each other as we used to with a guy named Will Clay, who was one of the really big 4x5 shooters in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. Still shooting a little bit, shooting digital now. But Will and I were up at Illinois Beach State Park. We're walking in on the way to the parking lot to get back in the car, because Will has an interesting way of saying it's breakfast time. He'll start chanting latte, latte. It's a hint. And we're walking in, and out of the corner of my eye, I see what I think is a curved wave. And I go, oh, that's cool. And I yell to Will, I says, I'll be there in a minute. I'm going to shoot something real quick. So like a half hour later, he comes walking back, says, what the hell are you doing? I says, this is in film days. If it was with digital, I would have known the second I got it. But I shot most of 3 rolls of 35mm slide film because I wasn't sure I got it. And when I processed all that film, I ended up with one frame that had this nice curve. I had a lot of them that had a curve on one side or the other. Long story short, this has been a pretty important image for me, because not only did it end up in the Sierra Club engagement calendar, and anytime you get an image from Illinois in that calendar, it's pretty remarkable. It ended up on the cover. You get one of those in a career. So that was a very neat image, and I almost didn't get it. I could have been the second frame I shot or the last. I have no idea. So we're experiencing things through our senses. And I have 6 senses that I'm sure a few people have expressed them this way. But that's what they've become to me: feeling, beauty, mystery, awareness, contrast, and simplicity. So let's talk about those. So Pictured Rocks to me is a very neat place. I photographed it a lot. It does something to me because I've hiked or backpacked quite a bit of that. That image was nice. This one's not. This is really garbage. And again, I can say that because it's my image. It's again a very early image shot in that Kankakee River effort on Kodachrome 25 or 64 film. And you look at it, you go, what do you want me, as a viewer, you say, what do you want me to look at here? What's the idea of this image? It's got all this garbage in it. You want me to look at the ice, the cliffs? I don't really know. The light's flat. It's failed. And I can say that because there's no obvious center of interest. It's ambiguous. It gives no, what I call, visual satisfaction to the viewer. That is our job, to give the viewers of our image visual satisfaction. not their job to try and interpret it. Another great Ansel Adams quote: "There's nothing worse than a brilliant image of a fuzzy concept." Now, technically, this is an okay image. Again, this is from that Kankakee River project. Like I said, I wish I knew then what I know now, because I got some decent images for the skill set, but the skill set was pretty low. We all learn. We all have to start somewhere. So again, this image is a failure. The composition's okay, but it has no obvious center of interest. It's ambiguous. It doesn't give visual satisfaction to the viewer. I can kind of see, well, it's a creek or river. It's actually a beaver pond, but you have no sense of that. I didn't put that in the foreground. Just kind of an eye level grab shot. Fortunately, I've learned a thing or two. And it also doesn't mean that the feeling I hope to bestow on a viewer is the same for all viewers or the same as mine. It really doesn't matter. As long as I get some emotion, some impact from the viewer, then the image succeeds. But if they don't get any emotion at all, if they just look at it and ignore it, pass it by, a viewer ignoring your image is image failure in a nutshell. For about 10 years before I went back to full-time work outside of photography, which I did, I was a wine consultant for a liquor store or a liquor chain in the Chicago area, which is an interesting occupation. But I needed to make some money as stock sales kind of fell off the roof. And I lost my point here. Go back. Oh, I'll think of it. So, what I was saying, I was in a gallery that I helped start, and there were originally 7 of us, and we called it Gallery 7. It was in downtown Joliet. Yes, there is a downtown Joliet, and it was an effort to help try and revitalize that place. Sadly, the powers that be have no imagination. We had a free spot. They thought they could sell it for a lot of rental money. It's still empty 8 years later. Anyhow, I left the gallery because I had to go back to work. But before that, we'd have monthly shows. Some of them were photography, some of them were painting, sculpture, you name it. But I would always make a point of opening night, as the crowds came in, to watch the people walk around the gallery. And what I was watching was not only their reaction at looking at things, I was watching which pieces they would pass right by, they would ignore, and which pieces they would stop at and really look at. And then I would go through right after kind of noticing that. And it was pretty obvious why they were stopping at certain pieces, So that has to go back with that, that idea of a connection with your viewers. So there's a lot of different ways of generating emotion and feeling in an image, and starting with those human senses. But the 6 artistic senses, which give us the aesthetic ways of tying things in, I think will work a lot better. We have a loose composition. We don't have that thing. We have misunderstanding. We have that ambiguity. We have confusion. Like, what do you want me to look at? That's not going to really key in somebody to sit there and really look at your image and get some impression from it. Not all images will get to that ultimate level. That awe level, that audible reaction. But usually, if you get some kind of reaction, you'll know that you've touched you've sparked some interest. Beauty. Beauty is one of those things that I make no apologies for. If you study the art world, you'll know that photography, probably the last 20 years, it's pretty much now considered an equal. But for a long, long time, unless the name was Ansel Adams or Elliot Porter or Edward Weston or a very few others, you know, it really was kind of like art's poor cousin. It just didn't get accepted. And Ansel Adams and Elliot Porter were two of the primary people, Alfred Stieglitz maybe, that really changed that perception, but it took 60 years. So it's been said, images worth 1,000 words. And this is one of those. Like I said, I've taught at the clearing, for 26, 7 years. And in the courtyard right across from the lodge is where we kind of, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we usually kind of call it quits. We'll come back after dinner, but we'll come up and we'll get a libation. As I said, I'm a former wine consultant. So we'll sit there and have a glass of wine or a beer or something and just talk shop or shoot the breeze or talk politics, rarely. Fortunately, most of the people there are aligned. And we'll just kind of relax and get to know each other. So this is a shot in winter. I've been fortunate enough to run some of my own events there. Some of the longtime instructors are allowed to use it to run their own things in the winter when it's not open. And so I call this waiting for class. And it's one of those, those images that, even if you've never been to the clearing and don't know what this is for, you can pretty much get the meaning of an image like this. It works for me. Making images for non-beauty is certainly a valid reason. If I see something like when I was doing the Kankakee River project, I found a dump of tires. It was acres of them, but it was far enough back in that the ranger didn't even know about it. So I photographed that and then gave him the images and said, you need to do something about this, which I believe they did. But there are other reasons for taking documents and things like that. And that's fine. It's a good use of photography. For me, I'm trying to make art. I don't care if it's an absolute 100% real image of something. I don't even know what that is. Nature for me is something to revere, to celebrate, to honor, and to create art with. It's interesting. When I was shooting film for a long time, when I shot 4x5, I'd have 2 holders in my pack, sort of 4 sheets of 4x5 black and white film. Because that way I could make a black and white image, because the color reversal material just wasn't very good. And now I stopped doing that, especially when I stopped shooting a lot of 4x5. It was a pain to try and carry 2 cameras, one loaded with black and white. So I kind of gave up black and white. Now with digital, you shoot color, you convert, and you end up with incredible quality black and white imagery. And black and white has that type of, just looking at it, it has that feeling of a little bit of antiquity of early photographic art. That comes from Ansel Adams and Group F64. So that's another reason I like to shoot black and white for the right subject matter. I heard a lot of conversations, it's kind of one of my pet peeves, that nature photographs or nature art is passé. It's no longer important. It's not valid. It's no longer marketable. To which I reply, BS. This is a shot behind the clearing lodge that looks out over Ellison Bay. And I usually stay in what they call the professor's quarters. And this is the Bayside room. It gives you this view. So I looked out. I always get up a day early. I looked out on Saturday night and the sunset was pretty awesome. So I ran out, I photographed it. I processed it that night because I wanted to use that in this image in the class. I thought it was pretty good. So one of the guys in the class said, "Oh, that's Bierstadt light." And that's a real compliment. Alfred Bierstadt was one of the Hudson Valley painters, Hudson School painters. So that's kind of a nice compliment. But it's beauty, and beauty for beauty's sake. Such work is valid for the welfare of my heart and soul, and reason enough for me. Why do we photograph? That answer is personal, varied in each of us. For me, I find most things in the world that inspire me to be beautiful. And that can be nature. It can be a lighthouse. I love to shoot lighthouses, old barns, architecture in general, new or old. And I want to share my viewpoint of things and share their beauty as it is. I mean, that's photography. One of the kind of neat things that come out of photography, certainly on the business end of it, especially on the nature photography business end, with the loss of stock photography as a viable income source. I mean, you can still make a few bucks, but it's not like it was right up until the mid 2000s. You could make a living off of it then, and I did for quite a while. But photography has become a way of sharing now, which is kind of a good thing. And since I'm semi-retired as far as the professional end of photography, it keeps me involved. It keeps me interested, and it doesn't matter that I don't need the professional end of it anymore, but I still need the spiritual end of it. So I make images for satisfy myself first and foremost. If they work for some other purpose, if they get published, great. If it brings a smile to somebody else's face, just as great. So I used to think of things like, masthead space and stuff like that. I don't anymore. And I found out as I went on in shooting a lot of stock photography, is if you tried to shoot that way, you ended up shooting for one very small purpose or one or two publications. It just didn't work. So you kind of learn at some point, shoot for yourself, shoot for your own sense of what you like, what floats your boat, and go with that. Let's talk about mystery. So, don't remember I got a slide in here or not on this, but a lot of these terms, I always knew about these headings. I always talked about them, but I didn't have good names for them. And this is one of them. I always knew their great images had this sense about wonderment. And then I got a book by a guy named David Ward. He's a photographer out of the UK, used to shoot 4x5. He's my age, exactly the same age. And I call him the Elliot Porter of the UK. I mean, he is just incredible, intimate landscape shooter. And if you don't know who Elliot Porter is, he was the guy that coined the phrase intimate landscape. It's that landscape. It's not the grand landscape. It rarely has a horizon. It's not the close-up. It's all that stuff in between. And it's what I think I do well, and it's what I like to do most. So when we find that sense of wonder or mystery, and that's using one of David's terms, what happens? Well, when you have mystery in an image, like this is shot at Wyalusing State Park, I have a little backpacking tent that has a mesh roof that if you're sure it's not going to rain, you can leave the fly off and watch the stars all night. So I woke to this light. That trip, my alarm clock had broken. It was before cell phones shot and film again. And I woke up to this unbelievable light streaming through my tent ceiling. I got out of that tent about as fast as you can. And that's what I looked out on over the bluff. And it's mist rolling in the Wisconsin River Valley. This is a mile or two from where it hits the Mississippi, with late sunrise light streaming in it, turning it yellow-orange. And you look at that and you go, what's down there? What's below all that? Where did that come from? It asked all of these rhetorical questions that you don't really need an answer to, but what does it do? It makes you look at it. And that's what we want. We want people to look at our images. So mystery is great on that. The answer, again, is only what the imagination of the viewer suggests. I don't have to label it. Sometimes captioning will give clues, and that's okay. But the answer is whatever the viewer perceives. And it's for each one, it might be different. Now, you might not recognize that this is a little creek unless you look way back in the middle of the image, and you can kind of see right in here, there's a little bridge there. But it is indeed a brook. And if you know it's a brook or a creek, you might say, well, is that flowing towards me or away from me? Again, asking the question is important. Putting the mystery in there is important. The answer is not. The answer is, doesn't make a difference. We can add mystery or question by making a line within an image, usually portrayed by a trail or a creek, a river, a path, a road, a log, you name it. Where does that go to? Where does it come from? Is it dangerous at the end of that? Is the boogeyman down there? But when we do that, we get interest. We can ask both questions. Is it going or coming? This is the Big Carp River from the overlook at Porcupine Mountains Wilderness State Park. And I purposely cut the creek off. If I were to tip that up or down, you would see more of the river. But I purposely cut it off to create that question, that mystery. Is that a weird oxbow lake, or is it a river or a creek? You don't know. We can add mystery or question by making a suggesting a coming event or a change or a passing of time or impending passing of. We can do that with sunrise, sunset. So when I shoot sunrise, sunset, I make shots with the sun on the sky and lower and lower and lower and lower, and then right above the horizon and on the horizon, halfway down, at 3/4 way down, almost gone, on and on and on. And inevitably, the shots I end up using, the ones I save and put in the file, are those that have that mystery or that feeling of it's almost gone or it's about to go down, that kind of stuff. So that works really well. We can add mystery or question by making abstract images, which I absolutely love to do. There is a book by a great photographer out of Canada by the name of Freeman Patterson. If you're not familiar with him, look him up. And he's got a book called Photo Impressionism and the Subjective Image. It not only taught me how to shoot abstracts, or helped me learn how to shoot abstracts, it gave me tools to make images when the traditional wasn't working. So this is a shot that if I hadn't shot it on digital media, I would have never have made it, or I wouldn't have made it as well, because when I framed it up, this little eddy current right in the middle, that little circle next to the log, was not visible to the human eye. It's a creation of time, a time exposure. In this case, about a second, half, 2 seconds, something like that. And it was dead center in the middle image. It just stagnated the whole thing. Well, then I just recomposed and fixed it. I wanted the log coming out of the corner, and I ended up having to crop that because I couldn't get the eddy thing in the log where I wanted them without having a little bit extra on the bottom. I had to crop off. But, that's another bonus of shooting digital media. Awareness. And this is really as simple as just paying attention. Or when you find something, doing something about it. So this is a shot of mammatus clouds over our house, and coneflowers, which are growing along my front border, along the sidewalk. And the widest lens I have, literally I've got the tripod on its side, and I got this thing propped up so I can barely slide my head and eye. I couldn't find a right angle viewer quick enough under the camera, and shot with a widest lens I had. And probably one of maybe 5 or 6 images in my whole 100,000 plus image file that I use a strobe on, because I just don't like strobe light. I used them in studios too long. But I have it on a cord when I need it. And otherwise these flowers were backlit. They were just black blobs. So it's awareness of what I'm looking at, awareness that those flowers are going to be backlit. I'm not going to see any color. And they're a purple pink, and I want that color because it makes the image. And the clouds are south of us, really over Joliet, and I wasn't worried about tornado. It was what they usually mean, that find a safe place. This is an image we're going to see again a little bit later, but it has to do with paying attention to your inner voice. As my buddy Will says, your spirit guide. Basically, it's your intuition. And we'll come to that shortly. Oh, here it is. So the whole time I was shooting this, in fact, the reason I shot this is I'm looking out over this field of wildflowers in the spring, and the blooms weren't real obvious. The bluebells were just starting to bloom. They weren't quite full yet. This looked like one tonal palette of green, and I dropped my lens cap. And as I bent over to pick it up, about mid-waist level high, the gray sky was reflected off these big, waxy, wide leaves of the mayapple plant. They're very flat. And it was like somebody flipped a switch they just turned on. I go, oh, that's cool. Now there's an image there. So I set up, I was making the image. The whole time I'm making an image, I keep getting this really strong feeling to look to my left, to go over to my left. I thought, well, maybe there's a bird or a critter running through the underbrush. And it made me stop what I was so strong. It made me stop what I was doing a few times. So I finally finished this image on the left, and I walked over to the left, and I saw this image on the right. Now, if you know spring ephemerals, if you know hard forest flowers, and you'll get these all over southern Wisconsin. And I don't know about these up in Door, but you'll get a lot of this stuff up in Door too. Prairie trillium, or sometimes they call it wake robin. It's really not, but they're similar plants, or toadstool. They don't grow this way. They don't grow this thick. They're really hard to photograph singularly because they're only 6-8 inches tall. It's hell dealing with the background. They're hard to photograph. And here I find a clump that's about 3 feet by 2 feet of them. And I'm going, wow. So that's what somehow out of my peripheral vision caught my eye. And I used to go back every year. It's been quite a while now. This is a 20-some-year-old image. But I went back every year because I wanted to try and do a little better job. I didn't really do a great job of creating a strong center of interest here. It's a neat pattern shot. I know I could do it better today, but I know exactly where that patch is, and I've never seen them grow that way since. So it goes to say, if you see something, photograph it. It probably won't be back. So how do we gain awareness? How do we do so? By paying attention and learning to pay attention, and concentrating on that. So then we can communicate motion, feeling, and mood through our art. We're reaching for kind of a transcendence, something beyond a simple description or the subject or scene, beyond a snapshot. I'm photographing these hoar-frosted branches. This was, my wife is, or now a retired school teacher, but she had my son in her first grade class. She went to the same school, and I would see them out to school every morning, and I opened the door to usher them out the door, and everything is covered with hoarfrost. I said, have a good day, and ran for the camera, and went down along the DuPage River, which is only a block from my house, and saw these beautiful hoar-frosted branches. And as I was shooting this, the geese swam into the image. And I said, oh boy. And then I just shot a bunch of frames trying to get them spaced right. So if we have a mental focus on possible subject matter, even subconsciously directed by our senses, those sensory perceptions will guide our image making. This is a tree, cedar tree, that looks like it's been beat by lightning, or I don't know. It kind of sits out there all by its lonesome, right on the Newport Bay shore at Newport State Park up in Door County. And And everybody that's photographer up there has photographed this tree. I've seen so many images. I probably have a couple hundred images of this tree. It's just so photogenic. I don't know if anybody in your group knows Dan Anderson. Dan's got a great shot of this. He's become a good friend of mine. But you see that, and it piques your interest, and it really kind of keys you into understanding the personality of that tree in photographing. I have my two favorite environments in the world are the hardwood, northern hardwood forests, and the prairies of the Midwest. It's just something that I'm really into. I like the subject matter. I know a lot of the plants, but I'm into that, so to speak. So my work usually can portray that well. And if your image doesn't portray those feelings, it's kind of how do you really expect somebody to have more than a passive interest in it? There's another thing. Ansel Adams always talk about pre-visualizing something. What he's basically talking about is you see something, you can kind of get a picture in your mind of how you want your photograph of it to look like. And you see that before you even bring your eye to the camera. In fact, I can sharpen that. I use what they call a framing square. And I still use one that is a ratio 4:5 because I see so strongly in that 4:5 ratio from shooting 4:5 medium form or a large format camera so long. And I end up cropping a lot of my current images to that ratio because it's just what I like. But I saw this image with the rushing water at the base of this little spillway dam and the cottonwood leaves, and it's all in shaded light. So I knew I would get that subtle blue versus yellow contrast, warm, cool contrast. I could see that in my mind's eye. I knew I wanted the water moving, so the sense of detail would be lost there. And that also helps focus the eye to the yellow leaves, which I put in a very negative space connotation. So a lot of it is non-subject matter. The subject's very small, but it carries a lot of visual weight, especially since it's on an edge and down in a corner. So I saw this image in my eye, and then I just had to execute it, which was interesting because that took a 2-second exposure, and the whole time those leaves are going like this. And I finally had to just sit there and look at it and say, how can I do this? And then I noticed that every few seconds they would hold still. And it took about more than a roll of film. It shot in 35. And eventually I got one that was sharp enough to make a fairly large print. Okay, second to last one here is contrast. I rarely go out to the field thinking I'm going to photograph X or a subject. Now, I may go out with a few things that I like to shoot, or I'm especially will notice easily, but I purposely have taught myself to be open to whatever's there. So again, it gets into awareness, it gets into things. And it's come down to now, I shoot what I notice, and I notice it because of contrast. So I pay attention to things that catch my eye. I continually ask myself, because I'll stop and I'll look, why did I notice that? What caused me to look that way? Especially if the subject isn't obvious. I'm attentive to smells like those lilies of the valley, sounds, a sense of movement, either physical movement or mental movement, directional movement, implied movement. I look for contrast. Of course, contrast, you can understand, is light versus dark. Obvious, but it's much more than that. Contrast in color. If you see a warm tone next to a cool tone, it's almost as sure as there is a picture there. I shouldn't say always, but 98% of the time, I find an image. This is out again in Wyalusing State Park in the winter. Late light coming in, lighting up the tops of the trees, blue shade, and just filling the frame with that. Contrast in physicality, the physical nature of the pattern of the waves, the pattern of, or the color of the rocks in the shallow areas, the springtime bud out, and the actual rocks in the shore. All different colors, all different physicalities, different textural elements. Contrasting pattern. I love shooting fungi and mushrooms. And pattern, it's almost as simple as filling the frame, but not quite. I love to have a pattern with something that is something coming out of it or within it that is a contrast. Most folks thinks of contrast as just light and dark. Like I said, it's much more than that. It certainly is light and dark. It's in color, in tone, in texture, in pattern, soft and hard. A big theme, if you look at a lot of Southwestern pictures, cactus against beautiful, delicate flowers, some kind of soft plant material against hard red rock. Soft and good. And in contrast in texture, or in concept. I like to play around with abstracts. So this is one of my older cameras. I could layer, same thing with my new camera. You can layer 10 frames on one exposure. So I would hand hold the camera intentionally, trying not to move it. Well, that's impossible if you're firing the camera 10 times, but it gives me this effect that's very akin to pointillism in painting, like painting by making a million little dots. You get very same feeling doing that with layering exposures. And then you can take it even farther. You can make 3 or 4 different ones of these doing the same kind of thing and then put them together on layers. So now you don't have 10 exposures, you have 30 or 40 or 100. Sky's the limit. Contrast takes in subject and background and the ability to separate those two. Very important with good composition. Or blend them something entirely new in an abstract sense. The background and the reflection. Background is a reflection, the subject is the surface water, but you don't see the separation of the two. It's my contention that without a good sense of contrast, you really can't make a great image or even a good image. So this is all shades of green and a little bit of brown. Even the brown has got, that green tint of summer, or what a guy I know down in the Smokies calls green haze, summer greens. But it's the arrangement, the structure of the image, with the layers of different texture and different tones of green that make that image. This is really one of my more favorite images. I just like that shot a lot. Contrast in color is sometimes it's pretty obvious, but it gives us a sense of place. And it removes all the other visual elements that are there, but we're not putting in the picture, but they're going into making the picture. With contrast, we limit non-wanted visual elements, extracting and simplifying what we want to highlight from the whole. Simplicity. This is the last one of my 6 artistic senses, or, oops, get that out of there. Okay. And I think with background control, simplicity, those 2 things, if when I teach classes, I always tell people, especially when it's beginners, if you take 2 things home from this class, if you learn to simplify and learn to control your background for the benefit of your subject, you will instantly make much, much better images. A great quote. It's one of my favorite quotes of all time from Leonardo da Vinci. He said, "The simplicity, the ultimate form of sophistication." And I truly believe that. You see a lot of this from guys like Rod Plank and John Shaw and Larry West, bless his soul, and all these guys that, you know, were Midwestern big time nature shooters, and others too, but especially Midwest, because we've got a lot of this kind of environment. These reed shots, a very simple image, but they're so effective and they're so simple. And simple is not a detrimental term. Why do we strive so much for simplicity in photography while avoiding complexity as much as possible? Well, let's look at, and this is a very complex image in the sense that there's a lot of detail and texture and stuff in it. But I've really simplified it by limiting what the background is. And then I've got these two little other trees, the conifers, coming out from within the image that gives you that counterpoint, gives you that contrast, a little bit of mystery. So let's look at the difference between painting and photography. Painting is an additive process. It's been said the best painters are those that know at what point to stop adding. And I really believe that because I've done a little painting. It's what got me into art, basically. Not very good at it, sadly. That's why I went into photography. It's one of those things I keep saying I'm going to pick up again. Who knows? I don't know. But I do love painting. It's a subtract, and photography is the opposite. It's a subtractive process. We look at something, so we start taking stuff out so our eye or the viewer's eye isn't taken to somewhere we don't want it. We get stuff off the edge. We get stuff out of corners unless we want it there, until we get to the point where they're left with the essence of the subject. Now, a painter would maybe paint this, and then say, oh yeah, I'm going to add in a little touch of the grasses. I'm going to add in the tree trunk. You don't need more tree trunk to say forest, especially with all those leaves. So that's really the difference. And that's what we need to concentrate on image making. There's another great thing that being a student of art in all its forms that I read, and I just love this. So economy of line is a teaching aspect of art, and it's especially important in cartoonists and many Asian painting traditions. And I'm not going to try to pronounce this. There's a Chinese proverb. I think it's Yi Dao Bi Du Bu Dao, something like that. But it's a great translation. Idea present, brush may be spared performance. And that's what we're doing. Like this shot. This is shot in parking lot number 3 at Newport State Park. On the edge, you tip the camera down and you see asphalt. But pagoda, excuse me, pagoda dogwood is a species that likes spoiled ground. And of course, when you put in a parking lot, you're going to have edges that ground has been spoiled, and this envelops it. Birch is also a transition species. So you see a lot of those growing in grounds that have been disturbed. And it was just as simple as framing it up, getting everything that needed to be sharp, and don't worry about the rest. So let's look finally at the two terms, simplicity and complexity. In a pejorative sense, simplicity can be unsophisticated, superficial, shallow, or half-truth. In a complex notion, it can be sophisticated, serious, deep, or truth. Well, we can turn that around and we can make it more positive. Simplicity can be easy, unadorned, elegant, essential, and clear. That's what we want. Complexity can be difficult, embellished, messy, unrefined, confused. And usually when we get a very complex image in a photograph, that's what we end up with. So we need simplicity to make great image. Whoops. Oh, shoot. It doesn't let me back up. For some reason this isn't working. Okay, I think we need simplicity to really make great images. We don't, sorry. Why, I can't get it to stop now. Well, fortunately, we're right at the end. Oh, there we go, okay. We need simplicity to really make images successful. Like I say, that's two of the biggest points I make in most of my classes. If you learn that alone, you're going to make better images. This is some old cherry picker housing up in Door County. And Dan Anderson did a really great little portfolio project called Barbara's Farm. When he grew up next door, across the street from there, Barbara is sadly no longer with us. But he introduced me to her and she said, come on over, bring your class and shoot the farm. And we did. And, so here we have great visual satisfaction. We have a barn window, very simple image, nothing but the window and a little bit of the wood, an old rotting curtain and a black hole. Now, if you go through a lot of composition books, they're going to tell you to avoid black holes like the plague. And normally I would agree with that. But in this image, it makes the image because you look at that and you go, what's in there? What's behind the glass? Where does it go? How big is it? How small is it? On and on and on. You ask questions because there's mystery there. And the image just works. We've got a print of this hanging in our bedroom. I really like that shot a lot. So that's it, folks. That's my 11 senses, our 5 physical ones, our 6 artistic or psychological ones. I don't go out and I don't have a checklist. I don't go through things. You do this long enough, it really does become second nature. And if it's not quite second nature, there's a real simple way of doing it, of making so. Go out and shoot more pictures and keep shooting them until it becomes that. It won't take that long. So we need to make images that kind of translate that awe and wonder of our subject matter to our viewers. And you do that, you're going to be very successful. Like I said, I don't use a checklist. I just keep these things in mind. It's sort of second nature now. Are there any questions?
Boy, quiet group.
Well, no, I want to point out that there's a link to his sites in the newsletter too. So all they have to do if they want to receive information from him is to click on that link in the newsletter.
All right.
Yeah,
Well, Mark, thank you very much. I don't know if we
you're
have
welcome.
any more questions for Mark?
It was great, Mark. You did a great job. Thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate that. So like I say, if you ever have any questions about that. Oh, also, I forgot to mention, if you want a copy of the note program, I have it all typed out and I can email it to you.
Great.
So I emailed
that would be very beneficial.
Huh?
That would be very beneficial. Thank you so much.
It's excuse me, it's hankphoto77@gmail.com. And you can say, send me the notes, or you can say, send me notes and sign me up for the blog. Or you can say, thank you, or you can say, whatever you'd like to. Ask a question, whatever. I'm always here.
His blog is very good. I follow
thank
it
you.
Each time it comes out. I think one just came out the other day.
Yep.
And
On
it's
spring
always
shooting.
very interesting and a pretty quick read, but lots of good stuff in it.
And as I always say, if it's not a topic or subject you want, you can hit delete.
Yep.
I mean, I get a lot of blogs, and there's a few of them that I read pretty much cover to cover. But occasionally, even with some of my favorites, I really pay attention to a guy named Guy Tao. He's a great writer. He's a really good photographer, kind of on the philosophy end of art. But every once in a while, even something he writes, who, I kind of preach Guy's religion, but even once in a while, he'll write something that just doesn't sit with me or doesn't, connect with me. So, that's normal.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
Members, anything else you want to discuss this evening?
What's the president's challenge for the month?
I couldn't quite make it out.
Water.
Oh, that's right. Water, all forms. All right. If no one else has any questions or comments, I think we're wrapped up for the evening. Thank you very much.
Bye all.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.
Bye. Everybody wrapped up?
Yep.
Good night.
We'll see ya. Good night.
Bye-bye.